3, 2.
Sound excited.
It's like on TV.
Did you listen to the beginning of the last one?
Huh?
It was. Oh God.
What?
Oh, the boy prince is going away.
As soon as you guys did that bullshit, it broke up for a second, so I had to restart anyway. So it's honestly a good thing that we did that.
All right. Well, hi. Welcome back to Second Breakfast. We're here to talk about House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 7, which is called Driftmark, but it is now officially October, so we're going to start with something completely different. Tristan, as an adult, what is your favorite Halloween candy?
God damn it. Let's try
You
that
think
again.
he's talking right now and
I
it's just not
know.
good?
He's trying so hard. He's like, no, it's all about the Twix.
Oh, he's going away. He's going. There he is.
I have no idea.
We're off to a thunderous start.
So I know that it came in, and I just went.
I want to hear a clip of that later.
So what was happening is like it kept freezing like incessantly. Like it would stop and start and it stopped, and then I was trying to explain that while it was stopped, and then it came in while I was illustrating what it was doing, and so I said it was going, and then you guys heard nothing of the explanation. And then I just farted onto the scene.
Nora?
Yeah. So okay. So
Okay,
hopefully,
let's try that again.
I don't know what just caused that, but it did that.
It was Nora.
That was a better opening than we were going to have.
Beyond the
Yeah,
grave.
truly.
So yes, as an adult, what is your favorite Halloween candy?
Absolutely Snickers. Like that's not even a question.
Ew.
No, that's a refined choice.
No.
Argue against Snickers, Maggie.
Snickers, there's so much going on in a Snickers because
Yeah.
it's 18 elements. It's too much. It's for
There's like 5.
that is for a child, a greedy little child.
Maggie?
What?
Here, this is good T-ball. You set me up. What is your favorite Halloween candy as an adult?
The Reese's Take 5.
And you just said Snickers was too much because it had 5 elements.
You're gonna tell
The
me
Reese's Take 5 has 4.
that Reese's answer to the Snickers, the Pepsi of Snickers, is your favorite candy bar?
No.
Tristan, lest we miss the forest for the trees, Maggie is arguing that the Take 5 has 4 elements.
Yeah, it's got chocolate, peanut butter, caramel,
Maggie,
and pretzel.
it's in the name.
Yeah, but what's the 5th one? You tell me.
Nougat.
There's no nougat in there. It's just peanut butter.
There's no way on earth it has 4 elements.
Take 5, like take a 5-minute
All right,
break.
all right.
Like,
Just
give me a
let me
break.
Let's do some research.
let me hold on one second. What is in a
Oh my
take?
God.
5?
Maybe the 5th thing is
Love?
the joy of Halloween.
Oh, you know what? You'll never get it.
What? What is
It's
it?
crunchy pretzels.
Yeah, I already said that.
Name them off, please.
Ahem. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't listening when Maggie was
No,
saying
you
her
weren't.
argument
You're a big
because
meanie.
it was wrong. But yes, so Maggie, there's 4 flavors in the Take 5.
Stupid.
I'm so confused.
Oh.
The caramel is barely there. It's really just peanut butter, chocolate, and pretzel. I'm gonna keep talking.
Okay. Here's the list. Here's the list. Crunchy pretzels.
Yep.
Smooth peanut butter. Salty peanuts.
But there are no peanuts
Sweet
in there.
caramel.
No.
And chocolate.
There is not a single peanut in a Take 5.
You want to eat one, Maggie?
Yes, I would love to unwrap one.
All right, go. Go do it.
It literally Hersheyland.com says Reese's Take 5.
That's the only
product
place I get my
details,
news anymore.
And here's what's in it, and I just, yeah, that's what it says.
Oh, I was going to say my favorite. Oh, okay.
Dear listeners, week 7 is the beginning. Where did Maggie go?
I'm getting the
she
Take
got-
5.
Is she just gone?
She got to take 5. She's back now.
There are no peanuts in this thing. That's
Maggie,
what?
does it say peanuts on the outside?
I'm not going to answer that question. There's not a single peanut in this.
Maggie, are you seriously going to be the person who has the wrapper in her hand
Do you see
and
a peanut in there?
refuses to say that it has peanuts in it
Do you
despite the
see-
fact that it says peanuts?
Do you see a peanut?
Do you taste a peanut?
I taste peanut butter.
What was that?
I taste peanut butter.
Do you taste a peanut?
No. What's a peanut?
What does the package say?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, listeners,
what's
I
your
just
favorite?
want you all to know who the real winner in this
Okay.
little debate was.
Cam, what's your favorite one?
My favorite is the payday, which I'd never had until like a month ago.
Oh, the old man.
It's wonderful. The saltiness is very refreshing.
It's for old men.
How do we feel about Baby Ruth's?
Ugh.
It's okay. I consider it a novelty.
I feel like they're at the same level, that and a Payday.
Yes, they're both for old people.
Yes. But I am partial to a Baby Ruth.
Cam, do you also like the Werther's caramels? Is that also?
Oh, yes. I used to carry around a pocket full in high school.
Wow. What a cool kid.
Yeah. I was
Tristan, how
I was
did you guys
unbothered
become
by
friends again?
girls.
Cam would frequently bring a pack of Dum-Dums and would save me the cream soda flavor to sort of indicate the level of favor that he had for me. It was sort of in the hierarchy of Dum-Dum flavors, right? Cream soda is sitting firmly at the top, so if you're getting that flavor, that's commensurate with the respect that he had.
Yes.
I'm sorry. The best flavor is blue raspberry.
No.
Maggie, your opinions are invalid.
That's a child's answer.
No, it's not.
We're asking about adult refined palate preferences.
Okay, I'm sorry. I take it
Grape
all back.
is the flavor for adults.
I'm just gonna take a. I'm gonna take it back.
It was a
for this
bag of
episode.
500.
He did have a big
Where
bag.
did you acquire that?
They're at Target. We saw them the other day and you made fun of me.
We saw a bag of 500 at Target.
Yes.
Why didn't we buy it?
Do you like Dum-Dums?
Yeah, I like blue raspberry. What are we
Blew
doing?
out the mic. Yes, I do. I'm 30.
I am not 30 yet.
So
Okay, welcome back to our
Let's-
serious podcast.
let's start with the dumb thing because once again,
The dumb thing?
I thought we were done, but I woke up.
We thought we were dumb.
I had no thoughts about the episode after watching it last night. Really enjoyed it, but didn't have any immediate notes. And I woke up with this theory just sitting there like an email in my inbox. There's more Macbeth in this.
Oh, of course there is.
So we have to go back to
Oh my god.
We
if
have
you,
to.
If you remember the floating banquo theory that I offered a few weeks ago, with the time jump, all the successive time jumps, I think you could argue at this point that the banquo, the guy who has the sons who could be king, who's arguing for his own lineage now, I think you could argue that applies to everyone who now has kids.
Sure.
That theory is almost exploded by the number of time jumps.
So
Because
everyone is Macbeth.
no, everyone's banquo. Only Viserys is Macbeth.
Yes.
Because it used to just be like, is it Otto? Is it Daemon? And now, for people who have kids who are worried about, well, my kids need a good line of standing in the succession, that includes Otto, Alicent, Rhaenyra, Daemon, Corlys, Rhaenys. They're all contenders there. So at this point, Viserys' death might resemble Julius Caesar more than Macbeth. It might be a Knives Out situation. But there is a new Macbeth scene that is being remixed into this episode. And I think it took me a second because it wasn't as apparent as the last few. Like the last episode had I argued the Burnham Wood coming to coming to the castle, and that was the fire at Harrenhal. The wood coming to the castle, the wood creates fire. This episode is remixing, or this episode was remixing an earlier event from the play, which is actually the big inciting incident for the play. It's the thing that topples the Jenga tower. It's the murder of King Duncan by Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. So for a little context in the play, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are plotting to kill the king while he's staying with them for a few days. Macbeth enters his chambers at night with a dagger and kills him, and then he goes back to Lady Macbeth, and she's worried that he didn't make the scene convincing enough and that he might be a suspect. So Lady Macbeth goes back in to, make sure the guards are dead and put the dagger in their hand and frame them. So that's sort of the context. But we know that these translations, if they're intentional at all, are never literal or one-to-one. The pattern in House of the Dragon that I've tried to point out for 7 weeks is boiling down a pivotal Macbeth scene to its core elements and remixing them. So if I boil down the context I just gave you, we have an incomplete royal murder, a safe haven castle, Lady Macbeth escalating a dagger-based work of bloodshed. So let's go through those individually. 1, an incomplete royal murder. You could argue that both Aemond and Rhaenyra experience incomplete royal murders because they're both maimed but survive. And
Also, Laenor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Laenor appears to be murdered, like Duncan, and Carl is kind of framed with that duel scene that they stage.
Is his name really Carl?
Yes, but
With a Q.
So he takes the place of the guards in Macbeth.
Okay.
To the next element, the safe haven castle.
Yeah.
Here, it's Driftmark, But in Macbeth, it would be Dunsinane. And Dunsinane is a fortress on a hill. And we see the whole surrounding area here for Driftmark. And that safe haven castle is violated. So Corlys finding apparently his dead son in the morning is the same as the scene in the play where Macbeth, quote unquote, finds the dead Duncan the next morning after the murder. The last element is the dagger and the Lady Macbeth escalating dagger-based violence. In Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, who I'm arguing is pretty much Alicent here, Lady Macbeth preps the dagger, and Macbeth tries to get cold feet and back out, and she just emasculates him until he goes and uses the dagger on Duncan and kills him. And then Lady Macbeth is the one who returns to the scene of the crime to plant the dagger. Here, similarly, Viserys resists any violence in this altercation with the kids, and Alicent goads and chastises him, basically emasculating him publicly in front of most of his cabinet and aristocratic friends. And then she accelerates. She doubles down on the violence by demanding a child's eye. Similar to Lady Macbeth saying at one point that she'd dash a baby's brains out to get what she wanted. And aspire to having the proper lineage of kings. And then she takes up the violence herself when she takes the dagger, like Lady Macbeth taking the dagger back to the scene of the crime to frame someone else for the violence. Alicent takes up the knife in an attempt to formally indict or condemn Team Rhaenyra for treason, for attacking her son, who she's positioning as a rightful heir.
Well, that's great. That's just excellent.
Now,
why don't you go fuck off?
I will actually engage with this theory.
Okay.
So for our dear listeners, the reason why these are Cam's theories, individually a lot of the time, is that he has this built-in Shakespeare knowledge base, and I've read a lot of Shakespeare, so has Maggie, but he's lived in this world for so long that it's hard for us to sort of play with a lot of these ideas because it's been a long time since we've seen or read these plays, and so they're not as ingrained in the immediate knowledge stores to pull from. So they're incredible insights. It's just hard sometimes to have a something to push back with. However, today I do. So if what we're looking at initially or originally in the play is Macbeth and Lady Macbeth conspiring to kill Duncan, would the analogs here not be Alicent and Otto as the Lady Macbeth stand-ins for Viserys in this case? Haven't the tables turned just a little bit at this point in time? Because if the king that's on the chopping block, so to speak, like we asked with our poll today, is do we think that Viserys is in danger of being murdered? And I think if he is, the most likely conspirators for that are going to be Otto and Alicent and all of the quote-unquote Greens, right? So, has Viserys shifted a little bit from being that Macbeth character to being more of a Duncan character?
I totally think so. That makes a lot of sense. It's because he's been so emasculated and so basically powerless for a long time. I think that is that natural transition, and that makes sense because Otto is so ambitious and he's overly ambitious. That's his whole problem. That's why he was fired in the first place. We could talk about why on earth Otto has been brought back. That's an interesting debate or question I want to answer. But I think Otto is really starting to occupy that role, which is fun in this nice, twisty, incestuous world.
The Macbeth role, you mean?
Yeah.
I like that idea, especially because I do think Viserys has to be murdered like Duncan, and I think that will be the inciting incident for this Targaryen civil war. But the thing I'm stuck on is that Macbeth absolutely never cares about who's king after him. It's just about preserving his reign. He doesn't have any kids. He never mentions wanting them.
And you're saying
that's
Otto...
the Banquo. That's the territory of who comes after me. My line must be kings. And Otto seemed like the example of that character. I like the idea of it moving to the next generation, kind of aging up those slots. Viserys is becoming more of a Duncan. To expand on what you just said, Tristan, the Viserys Death Watch, I mean, I thought he was going to get gutted in the wheelhouse at the end of the episode.
I was expecting
Right.
Alicent to just whip out a dagger and kill
because
him.
he has so been demoted. You can't really argue I guess I can't really argue he's Macbeth anymore because Macbeth is the protagonist, and Viserys is barely a third tier character now.
Yeah, he's fading.
Like for multiple episodes now, he's nowhere near POV, and there's no sign he's going to bounce back.
No.
There's even a moment when he's leaving one of the altercations at the beginning at the funeral when
He
he
super
says,
has dementia.
Yes.
He super
Yes.
has dementia.
he says, "I'm going to bed, Aemond." He calls Alicent by the wrong name.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to get like a super insightful, his perspective sort of episode before he dies. Sort of like the narrative really focuses in on Ned before he dies.
Oh.
I don't think it's going to be like that. And I want to see what you guys think of this idea of kind of redistributing, re-rolling the dice of these analogs. I think the old Viserys has been sort of chopped up into pieces and given out to other characters. Like the last time Viserys was Viserys, when he was still declining health-wise, but a protagonist.
Yeah.
He spent all of his time worrying about legacy, and Corlys utterly takes up that cause in this episode.
Sure.
So I could see, I mean, maybe they could become friends, or maybe just Corlys becomes that role. He becomes more of a presence in the show.
Okay.
Because, I mean, through all the time jumps, he looks exactly the same. So presumably we're going to
He's
follow
doing
him
good. He's fine.
for a while more.
Yeah.
Similarly, Rhaenyra gets a royal knife wound, sort of like Viserys did from the throne.
Oh, sure.
And
okay.
I think that sort of reminded me of his early days. And Rhaenyra even gets her own Macbeth echo when there's a close-up shot in her struggle with Alicent of Rhaenyra's face and a floating dagger
Oh, sure.
Yep.
with the fire in the background. So
Yeah.
I think Rhaenyra becomes that character.
Sure.
And you could argue she doesn't have any kings that will come after her because her children are by this standard illegitimate because they're not trueborn. So maybe she becomes that royal dead end that Viserys was when he was
Well,
Macbeth.
I mean, now that she's married again. But for first, that's an interesting tidbit to unpack in just a second. More like Wincest, am I right, Maggie?
Good for them. I'm happy for them.
But first,
The happy couple.
in this whole Viserys vein, he's become a very tragic character because, in my opinion, he died that episode, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago, whenever he had that scene where he was like, will I be remembered, Lionel, will I be remembered as a good king? Essentially.
Yeah.
How will I be remembered? That was him realizing that his, the time that he had to be a valiant king or whatever was done. His works had largely been accomplished, and there wasn't much more that he was going to be able to do. So that's sort of also when we stopped seeing his POV anymore. And what we're seeing now is sort of like the dying embers or the final, the death rattles, the rasps of his life, with the few sort of manifestations of power that he's still able to muster. Sort of the outburst that happened in the chambers whenever everyone's in there, Rhaenyra and Alicent get into that fight. That sort of, to me, signaled the last time that he was going to be able to effectively sort of get in the way and stand between Alicent and Rhaenyra, because he's in such poor health. He's got the dementia set up from the beginning of this episode. Alicent's clearly going batshit about all of this, and now Otto has come out. And before, early on, we were like, okay, is Otto just playing the game, or does he actually care about the realm at all? And I think if there were any more questions about that, they've been firmly answered by this episode, where he actively encourages that nonsense, just the absolute lunacy that was on display from Alicent there. And so he's only going to encourage that. I'm scared of what Alicent is going to become if she already isn't that. Between Otto's influence and now Strong, what's his
Larys.
name? Larys Strong. They are feeding the crazy.
Oh, yeah. It's dangerous.
And it's becoming an echo chamber for her right? Because she's finally doing something that people are reacting positively to, only these people aren't necessarily the ones that she should be taking cues from, right?
And I think she's going to feel even more empowered with Daemon and Rhaenyra's marriage. I think she's going to be even more like angry about her, and like she'll of course assume that she killed Laenor, so she's just going to feel more
It's also
righteous.
it's validating for Otto. It's proof that the reason he was exiled the first time, he was in the right.
Yeah, right.
So maybe that will give him some sort of stock with Viserys in his final moments. You referenced that poll, Tristan, that we threw up earlier, which is the same one we asked last week, but I think it continues to be relevant. How will Viserys die? Old age, natural causes, or murder? And I think we got over like 40, 45 votes on this one, which is more than last week. People seem pretty animated. And I watched the numbers all day, and it just bounced back and forth between the answers. And it ended up being like 60-40.
Percent.
Yeah, 60 for...
In favor of what?
60 for old age, natural causes, and 40 for murder.
That seems to be a change from last week.
Yes, it was... Yeah, and I think it's growing more likely that it's going to be murder.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, Cam, you said yesterday, like, the longer that he doesn't die of natural causes, the more likely it is that he's going to be murdered instead. So.
And I really thought it was going to be Alicent at the end of this episode. She was just going to pull the knife out of her and just gut him. And, like, they get to the boat. Oh, he died along the way.
He's so old.
But, Tristan, you referenced Larys. I think he's the monkey wrench here, even more than Otto, because when he offers his services to Alicent,
he's
at
like,
the end
I'll
of this
cut
one,
a kid's eye out, no problem.
Yeah,
I'd do it.
She's like, I didn't ask.
something in her doesn't want to ask for that, but we saw her in the moment ask for Cristen Cole to go gut a kid.
Oh, she demanded
It also
yeah.
doesn't matter anymore because now that she knows what he's capable of, her saying literally anything to him that would sort of open the door to, oh, we could do something about this is a tacit endorsement regardless of whether or not. Now, she can pretend to continue to have the high ground by not asking for the thing, but ultimately that's what she's doing because now she knows what he's capable of.
And now that she did feel comfortable calling on Cristen Cole because he's the more presentable, buttoned-up version of Larys, right? They're both kind of pieces of shit, but Cristen Cole is the more official version. He didn't help her at all. He completely backed down.
No,
I mean, Daemon, like, touching his chest was enough to deflate him during that scuffle.
Yeah.
I think either she's just going to turn to Larys, or maybe Larys just does something to impress her. He makes some grand gesture and kills one of the kids.
I did this for you. Please
Yeah.
go out with me.
they sort of tip the directors sort of tip their hand to that whenever they say, you know, whenever Alicent says to Larys, you know, I need somebody who can also be discreet, because I think we saw her realize the limitations that are inherent to having Cristen Cole as a right hand, because, you know, you're sworn to me, and he was like, as your protector,
not as a child maimer.
you know, and because there were just so many people there, and we also learned still that Cristen sort of covets what little honor he still has as being, you know, in being a White Cloak, and he's also sort of restrained by the captain of the Kingsguard. What is his actual name?
I don't know.
Harold?
Yeah.
Harold Westerling?
That's something like that, yeah.
I'm not sure. The dude who played
Dwalin.
a dwarf in The Hobbit.
Yeah, it's close to
Dwalin.
that. I think it's that.
So we got to see the camera focus in on him for a second, as if he was prepared to sort of pounce on Cristen. So I think generally the court understands the allegiance there, and so he would have been restrained had he tried to act there, right? So, you know, even if he had wanted to act, I don't think he could have. So I think he was just saving face a little bit.
It's weird. That was like the first time we'd seen, his name is Harold Westerling, I just checked. That's the first like line of dialogue we've gotten from him since Rhaenyra's wedding, when he was just the guy introducing royalty at the front door. But that actor is titanically good.
He is good.
Yes.
And he's had nothing to do for 7
Underutilized.
I know.
Absolutely
I,
underutilized.
every time he's
But-
in here, I'm like, oh yeah, he's in this show. What are we doing?
But like, if we remember back to that like marble scene when Cristen Cole got this job, almost no one in this circle has any sort of combat experience. I imagine Harold Westerling does, just by the beard.
Yeah.
So once the war actually begins, do you think that's when he becomes a real character on the show?
I guess so. Because otherwise, why did they hire Graham McTavish?
Right, because he's too good for a
Cast, not
background
hire.
role.
Yeah.
He's also almost too high a profile.
Right.
For that, I mean, between Outlander and The Hobbit and all these things, he's not just a character actor anymore.
Right.
Question. Okay. So we set up in that scene that I'm talking about sort of a conflict between Cristen and Westerling, right? So we know that Westerling is a little suspicious of Cristen because he eyed him whenever all of this stuff went down. What if we're being set up for a clash between those two? Sort of if ultimately Viserys is going to be murdered, who's in a better position than Cristen Cole to carry that out? Right? Just exactly how we saw Jaime be the one to kill Aerys or whatever the most recent, the Game of Thrones Targaryen king was.
Mad King.
The Mad King, right? There's a reason why it was a Kingsguard who was able to do that because they have the most unfettered access.
It'd be like
right?
a Secret Service agent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think Cristen Cole is in that pole position, if you will, to do that this time. So what if it's like a mini Clegane Bowl where we've got this teed up now where they're in conflict, and then like whenever he ultimately goes to carry out that murder, that's going to be the final person in between Cristen Cole and Viserys.
Yeah.
That, or if Viserys dies on his watch, maybe he has to end his life. Something like that.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, he's well positioned to do that, but I'm trying to think of a scenario where he would feel motivated to do that. Because I don't know what it would...
Who, Cristen?
Yeah, because he's loyal to Alicent, but as we saw, not that loyal. So what would drive him to do that?
I think it's a larger question. Is Cristen Cole for sale? And then by extension, do we think Larys Strong is for sale?
I think...
Are these ideological alliances with Alicent?
Cristen Cole is still... I think he still just wants Rhaenyra. I think he'd only do something if he could be promised her.
2 husbands on, I think maybe he's moved on.
I don't know. I think he's just,
But like Larys Strong, do you think he was just allying himself to whoever the queen was?
No.
Would he, if Daemon puts on his back alley hoodie and goes to try to buy off Larys or team up, would he take that deal?
I think Larys went to whoever he perceived to be the weakest, to a person who he could exert his influence on the easiest.
Totally.
Like the most malleable person, and who better than a teenage girl who's been thrust into basically the second highest seat in the land
Sure.
with no experience.
And who might look on him with pity rather than disdain the way a man might, right? So he can more easily manipulate this.
And we already saw that he has experience with women because whenever we had the hunt scene, the hunt episode, that's who he was speaking to. He was in and around those social circles, so he understands how that works.
That's really true.
I also do not buy, say we do draw battle lines and we go to our respective corners and have our war councils. Otto Hightower will never trust Larys Strong.
No.
He's not going to want a guy like that in their corner.
No. I mean, that's like Varys and Littlefinger. They don't trust each other.
So if Larys is a free agent, he goes to Daemon. I don't know who else could corral him.
Well, I'm saying I think he'll probably stick by Alicent because I don't know if anybody else would be able to.
Unless Otto pushes him out, though.
You're right, but
I think if Larys goes, Alicent has no chance because at this point in time, I think that Rhaenyra and the Blacks. That side, but we keep calling it the Greens and the Blacks. I think because people understand that from the novels, but we really haven't heard it said in the show yet. We've seen visual cues for sure.
Right.
I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think if he goes to Daemon's side, Alicent has no chance because he's sort of her nuclear weapon in addition to the dragons, right?
Yeah, because she's got Otto, but.
But I question his influence at this point in time because people know that he left and then came back and there were weird circumstances there. But also, Larys scares the crap out of me because if he was willing to do that to his father and brother.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about Alicent. He's got bigger machinations than she even understands right now, because she can't see further than the fact that she feels like her and her line have been slighted by not having a direct claim on the throne.
Right. Yeah.
So are we, just to check in again after last week, are we Team Rhaenyra or Alicent?
Rhaenyra.
It's clearly like, if there was ever a question last week, it is clearly Team Rhaenyra, and I don't know that you can. I don't know if there's even an option to be Team Alicent at this point after seeing, sort of the way that she's behaving. She and her family, her children included, are being set up to be the villains,
Totally.
unabashedly.
Do you think you could be Team Lannister in Game of Thrones? Do you think you could be Team Stark or...
Well, that's hard. I mean, yes, you're Team Stark, but like after a certain point, you're not Team any family. You're just Team individuals, because they all fall apart.
Do you think this show is taking more of a side than Game of Thrones did?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Because even though the Lannisters are definitely the villains, it's not just two sides. Like, this show is like there's one side and there's another side. Game of Thrones was like, well, the Lannisters are the enemies of the Starks, but the Targaryens are the enemies of the Lannisters, but the White Walkers are the enemies of everybody, but the what's Marjorie's, the Tyrells are the, like, it was way too complicated. It wasn't Team A versus
two women.
It wasn't
Right.
Yeah,
just
right.
two characters.
Yeah.
Because that line that Rhaenyra throws at Alicent of, exhausting, wasn't it, hiding beneath the cloak of your own righteousness,
Oh, that was
but
good.
now they see you as you are.
I love
yeah.
that. It was
That's
so good.
I mean, we are on her side there.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's an argument against that, like you said, Tristan, because this episode, like, yes, you could argue they're both being protective mothers here, but Alicent always postures as being honest and dutiful, and Rhaenyra really only ever asserts that she's the rightful heir. But after this episode, Alicent looks extra vengeful, going Hammurabi on a kid, and Rhaenyra looks kind for sparing Laenor.
Right.
Like, Alicent has not won an episode.
No, that's really true. And there's also an interesting moment. So, obviously Alicent and Rhaenyra do not like each other, and it's been like that for a long time. But at one point, I think it's when Daemon and Rhaenyra are talking on the beach, before they consummate their holy matrimony. But she says something like, I don't think Alicent is capable. I don't believe that Alicent is capable of murder, when talking about the Harrenhal fire. And I think she genuinely means that, or she's trying to convince herself of that, because she still remembers, this is my childhood best friend, and I don't want to think poorly of her, even if there are things that she doesn't like about her, and there are things that she's done that she, that offend her, versus Alicent, who only has hate and spite for Rhaenyra, and was willing and wanted to gut one of her children's eyes out and stab her in this hall in front of everybody, including the king. So, yeah. Rhaenyra is, not a great person, but she seems more honest than Alicent. That's the thing.
So, while we're judging characters, how do we feel about Laenor?
Poor guy.
I was fed up with him after last week. I was just like, you're useless. How are we going to neatly wrap up your storyline? And I knew that it felt like they were going to do that. And lo and behold, they have done that. But I found myself liking him throughout this episode. And again, you get to see the rapport between he and Rhaenyra.
I know. It's so good.
And, you really do get the feeling that had things been different, like had he not just been born the way that he is, they could have been a good, quote unquote, for the time, a good couple had they produced heirs. Right. Because they are compatible. They are, they do have the ability to sort of conspire together and carry out plans, as dark as it was. They worked together and they got it done. And they did that for the past 10 years too, because each of them knew that they were just sleeping around the entire time. And you see that sort of regret from both of them, wishing that they had been able to do their duty, whatever that is, right? In this case, producing heirs that are actually true born. So I like him at this point in time. I'm not super cool with just killing one of the servant boys.
Right.
That's not nice.
Bad. But I'm glad that we didn't have to kill Laenor in order for our true couple, Daemon and Rhaenyra, to be together. But I'm glad that Laenor gets to go off.
Yeah, it's good that he gets to escape and chase his happiness. But he lets a guy be killed in his place, and he fully abandons his wife, family, and dragon.
And he makes his parents think he's dead.
His parents think he's dead. Exactly. It's pretty irredeemable.
Listen, these people are not good people, but it's all relevant.
But this is like the road not traveled by, because this is an even worse elopement than Rhaenyra and Cristen Cole would have been.
This is what Cristen wanted.
But there's another parallel. Laenor, that last shot of him escaping on a boat felt very Gendry.
Oh, okay.
Do we think we're going to see Laenor again? Because him existing, him just walking back into town, would nullify Rhaenyra and Daemon's marriage.
Totally. He's got a lot of power.
But
why would he come back?
If he's willing to abandon his wife, kids, and dragon, what's going to bring him home?
I was going to say, what could possibly bring him back? I don't know. And I think now that he doesn't have his fancy Velaryon hair, he can blend in wherever he is.
Do we know that he's abandoned his dragon? Because it seems to me, if you swim off in a dinghy, the easiest way to get to Pentos or wherever they're going is to go find wherever your dragon is like shackled up and take him. Maybe that would be too easy because they would notice he was gone.
Exactly. They'll notice the dragon is
I don't know.
gone.
Everybody be stealing dragons in this episode. So
But forever. Anyone who sees a guy with a dragon in Pentos is going to send a letter over to the king.
Exactly.
And he's going to be hunted for the rest of his life.
Yeah, because I think, if I understand correctly, dragons aren't just wild. Like, the dragons are all owned by, like, the Velaryons and the Targaryens.
But, like, this is sort of a bigger question before we move past the Velaryons. Who are they allied to now?
I don't know.
If between the Rhaenyra-Alicent dynamic.
Oh, I don't know, because they're all going to think that Rhaenyra killed Laenor. So it's going to be bad news.
Because, Rhaenys even talks about that, with how Helaena died, saying that we had better maesters. So you could argue they're Team Alicent because both of their kids, were their deaths kind of had Daemon and Rhaenyra involved.
But I don't think that they're a united front anymore.
No,
I think that Rhaenys is absolutely going to be Team Alicent, and I think Corlys has been set up to absolutely be Team Rhaenyra because he has no pride in the blood; he has pride in the name, and those are Velaryons by name.
Those are his kids,
even if they won't be Velaryon whenever they ascend to the throne. That was sort of the deal that he struck with Viserys.
I agree that there's discord between them in this episode, but I mean, kind of like you just said, when it comes down to it, I think. Maybe arguing the other way, I think they're both going to be Team Rhaenyra because all of their grandchildren are connected to Daemon or Rhaenyra.
That is true.
all of their and if we have that Corlys speech in this episode, if you're thinking about your legacy, turning against your sworn king and then him losing is not going to look great for you.
That's true.
I think they almost, now that Daemon and Rhaenyra are married, I think all Velaryons sort of have to be Team Rhaenyra.
And because even if Rhaenyra's kids, even though Rhaenyra's kids are not technically Laenor's, Daemon's kids are Laenor's.
Exactly.
They are her kids. So, that's interesting.
Also, now one of them could get Laenor's dragon.
Yep.
I wonder if they'd try to more conspire to get Daemon and Rhaenyra convicted of something and then seize the children and take custody of them. Do you know what I mean?
Think that is. I think they have been too heavily wronged to be firmly on the side of one or the other.
That's true.
I think given the schism, it's easiest to jump on Rhaenyra's side and then have some further plot to figure out how the Velaryons end up on top.
To be cautious allies,
Tristan, you talked about the green and black divide, which I know we talked about the green wedding, and this week people are calling this the black wedding. And as the episodes go on more, I think there's an episode coming up called The Black Queen. So I think the show is going to make those terms more clear to us. So going into season 2, we're going to know green and black are sort of the colors we're playing with here. But to return to the kind of incest watch question, the Black Wedding in this episode is largely bloodless for a Westerosi wedding. You could argue
There's
maybe
quite a lot of blood.
no, but you could argue like 1.5 Velaryons had to die for this wedding.
That's true. Can I just say, Cam, really quick? I'd like to redo our wedding ceremony and just reenact that.
Oh God, cutting your
Slice our
lip.
lips open and mix our blood.
Also,
drink
the
it?
whole blood mixing thing was absolutely unnecessary. They have the same blood already.
That's very true, but she said like we have to bind our blood.
And we were just talking about like bloodlines and loyalties. Mm-hmm. This is my question. What does Daemon do now? Does he scheme to just protect Rhaenyra and her kids? Does he scheme to privilege his kids over her kids?
He makes more kids.
But like, who does here's
They have to
maybe
make
let's
pure
start here.
Targaryen children.
Does he care about his kids enough to fight for their place in succession? Or does he care about Rhaenyra enough to not try to usurp her once she becomes queen?
I don't think he's going to try to do that. I think they're going to have their own like pure Targaryen blonde children and then say bye-bye to the other kids.
To the 4 kids that they've had?
Yeah. Well, I don't think
spent 10
they're
years
not going to
with?
kill their children, especially because Rhaenyra is not going to kill her
But doesn't
kids.
that invite a conflict?
I mean, yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? I don't know.
Because his daughters now have no line to the throne. It would just be Rhaenyra's kids first.
Yeah.
Does that
unless
brew
they
conflict?
unless they marry each other. You know?
2 boys, 2 girls.
Yeah.
Ew.
That's the way they do
solution.
it. You're welcome.
Gross. Maggie
And
is the incest master.
Maggie, in keeping with her tradition, is absolutely team Wow, you've already started. We've seen them for like 2 episodes, and you're already like, yes, pair them.
I wish you could see the way she looked at me when she said that. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world.
Yeah. I mean, we saw Allison's kids talking about how I don't want to marry my sister, and I was like,
Yeah, the one who
so
likes the
gross.
bugs.
He was like, we have nothing in common. He's like, well, she's
Okay,
your future
I
queen.
want to talk about her for a second.
Okay,
Helaena.
she seems
Yes.
cool. I didn't know her
She-
name. Thank you.
She, very MCR. Did not know that was her name either. So, okay, is she some sort of like seer? Is she some oracular
she's like a witch.
thing?
Right.
Because she. I don't remember the exact quote unquote, prophecy, whatever it was she was saying.
Talking about spindly dragon stuff.
I don't know what the deal with the spider and the clamshell is. I don't know. We can unpack that image if we want to, but well, let's do it. What's the spider equivalent in this world?
Well, a spider-
clamshell's the sea, perhaps.
Sure.
Right.
Spider could be, someone like Larys. Somebody weaving a web and sneaking around like Allison or something.
I think it's more the idea of a trapped animal.
Sure.
Or someone being trapped.
Well, and Rhaenyra said that the sea is a trap. No, she said the fire is a trap. The sea is an escape.
But
That's what she said.
Helaena, like you were talking about Tristan, she kind of speaks in those weird prophetic riddles.
Right.
She mentions a dragon, and then she mentions, but he'll have to close an eye.
Oh.
Which applies to the kid being blinded and
Neato.
getting a dragon. So even
Yep.
if she doesn't know it, I mean, like we talked about this last week, we now have, between her and both of Daemon's kids, we have 3 young women on this show now, and we don't have like established futures for them yet. When we were talking about prophecy and religion last week, because I said there are no witches from my Macbeth allegory, we've got 3 women now.
Oh, interesting.
So maybe once their families are united, if they develop some sort of bond, that could be a wrecking crew.
Now that is fun. I like that. Yeah, I hope that she turns out to be some kind of seer.
Sure.
Weird.
We need one of
And
those.
also the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, wasn't that like passed down from one of it was a Targaryen female from the centuries past or whatever?
I think so.
So it runs in their line as well.
Cool. I love that. Oh,
And what a line it is.
what a line
Yeah,
it is.
truly.
So I had a thought here again this morning after watching the episode. I thought this episode felt a lot more like the first 5 than it did last week's episode. We were talking about it settling into more of a Game of Thrones rhythm of the life and times of these people crossing over with each other's storylines. But this one was all big events and gatherings and felt like that greatest hits structure that we talked about for the first 5. And I looked into it a little. because we read that interview last week with Ryan Condal saying that season 2 is not going to do big time jumps anymore. Apparently, next week's episode, which is episode 8, is the last big time jump, and it's 6 years.
Whoa.
Oh.
And then after that, we settle down. So we're going to age up the kids. I mean, you have to for most of them. But like zooming out, so these are the time jumps between episodes for these 8 that we have to talk about. 6 months, 3 years, 1 year, 1 month, 10 years, 1 month, 6 years.
Wow.
So it's like 20-ish years that we're covering in the first season, and then it settles down. And I was worried that might feel strange, that like pacing shift into season 2. But then I realized I've spent the last year talking about The Witcher. And The Witcher does this perfectly because we have the short stories that jump all around the timeline. And then the story settles into this linear, novelistic timeline.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
at
it
this
makes
point,
sense.
like House of the Dragon's going to do a better Witcher adaptation than the show.
Yeah. Well, and even this episode, like I see what you're saying about how it felt more like the first episodes of House of the Dragon, of it kind of feeling like a greatest hits, but it also takes place over the course of 12 hours?
This episode?
Yeah. It's not a long time because it's really just Laena's funeral that night and then I guess the next day or two. Like it's pretty quick, but you're right that just the way it's, not in terms of time covered, but just its structure and its feel and its pacing are a lot more like that.
The last couple of weeks, I've been listening to the first Game of Thrones audiobook a bit. And settling back into the rhythm of that story, you cover time so slowly. You cover, I mean, every single chapter has a blockbuster, like really exciting event in it. Even if it's not The Watchers on the Wall or Hard Home, it's really exciting for that character.
Sure.
It's a really gorgeously written story, but you cover time so slowly that you see people think and chew on things. And I've been trying to zoom out and really understand this world better because we keep changing actors and moving forward so many years. I wonder if this greatest hits approach almost makes a claim about history while obscuring that claim. I want to know what you guys think of this.
Okay.
Mainly, it's that there's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of time for brooding and pouting and begrudging others. Basically, there are a lot of pulled punches. And what we see every week in this greatest hits of this show, it's like the calcified explosion of those grievances. Like the way it almost make more sense for me why these characters seem to age so fast and so roughly, because they've been poisoned by spite and resentment.
Sure.
Comparing this Alicent to the one we met a month and a half ago. Like, if I think about her character, I understand it, even if it seems like a crazy escalation on the surface. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that the time jumps have really served to help that because sort of I feel like a big part of the issue with, I mean, the obvious comparison, right, is Daenerys. In Game of Thrones. We saw her, we grew up with her from season 1, but then by the time the last season, what is it, 8?
Yes.
Rolled around, and we got to see her do her heel turn for like 2 episodes. People felt robbed because we saw it happen, and we saw like the subtle changes in her character over time, and we, yes, I can take the logical steps to see how she might get there given those experiences, but it almost, leaving it to the imagination makes these jumps more believable because with all of the time and the experiences, just like the ones that we get to see, countless numbers of them having happened that would just occur off screen, right? You can sort of suspend your disbelief and understand, okay, well, maybe after 15 or so of these events, that's how this character gets entrenched in this position. Versus growing up with someone as your hero character, maybe your self-insert, the one you're rooting for, and then all of a sudden they go off the deep end. That feels hollow. That feels like you've been robbed of something.
Yeah. Well, and
versus
sorry. Well, I feel like Dany's arc is more suited to something like this show of that like jumping through time because I mean in the books, I mean I haven't read all the books, but from what I know and have read, there are like I think like Clash of Kings, there are like 4 Dany chapters. Like not as much is happening with her, but the show doesn't want you to forget about Dany, so they had to kind of like fill the time and kind of create things for her to do, for her story to make sense and for us to not forget that she exists as a character, not go 4 episodes going, where on earth is Dany? But so I think her arc makes more sense for a structure like this show. And I think maybe that's also why her turn is so jarring for some people, because she hasn't had like loads and loads and loads and loads of screen time and story the way that someone like Tyrion had, you know? And so it's like, what, she was this like victim child bride, and then she freed some slaves and now she's killing people. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but it's because she's just had a different, her story structure is different from the others.
But also, the more we learn about this twisted, incestuous, evil family, I mean, the Targaryens are by far the most evil family in Westeros. It used to be the Lannisters, but that looks almost like a sitcom now.
Sure.
I love that. I love what they've done with Jason Lannister.
Oh, he's fun. He's so funny.
The more episodes we have of this show, I think the more believable Dany's... And I'm one of the people who thought... I totally believed her turn in the Bells. Totally believed it, and I thought they built up to it okay. In the same way the last seasons were a little rushed. I think that applies to every storyline, not really anymore to Dany.
Sure.
But every week I see more from Daemon and Viserys and Alicent and all these people.
Yeah.
I more believe Dany's turn.
Like oh, I get it.
They're building out how rough that family is.
Because I think, because when you watch or read Game of Thrones, the literal only Targaryens you get to see are Viserys and Dany. And Viserys is like unhinged batshit crazy, right? And the only other Targaryen you hear about is the Mad King, who was unhinged batshit crazy. And so you assume that, well, Dany's not like that, so why would she all of a sudden turn, when you're seeing like versus like the Targaryens in House of the Dragon that are not totally unhinged off the walls, but they are bad people, you know? And so you kind of see that more nuanced take on a Targaryen. Yeah.
But even following young Rhaenyra and young Alicent, that whole conflict, they weren't what they are now back then.
No.
So if we'd been following them at that more glacial pace, we wouldn't have believed what we just saw in this week's episode.
Sure, right.
So maybe when you go from that glacial, more prose-like pacing to this greatest hits thing, when you make that jump, I think you lose causation. And that's what people complain about for Game of Thrones. Yeah. But now that we're starting here, we'll sort of believe anything. I mean, Rhaenyra's had like 3 husbands in 3 episodes, and it's fine.
And you're like, okay, that's cool.
Daemon has
and
killed
you're like,
3
Team
wives.
Rhaenyra.
Yeah, it's
go for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting the way that these characters are so different from Game of Thrones, and it's interesting to see just how our opinions have changed. What?
So to shift a little bit, I wanted to talk about the scene where Aemond steals Vhagar.
Sure.
That was interesting.
That was super cool, and it felt very YA. It felt very young adult, like
How to Train Your Dragon.
Well, no, it felt honestly, it was really cool because you got to see this kid who, you know, until now, like, yes, they did the weird pig thing to him, but he's pretty innocent. He just wants a dragon, right? Like he just.
I want a cool
I think
dragon.
we can all relate to that. Can you imagine it being your birthright to ride dragons and you fucking can't?
Yeah, you have a pig. Yeah, I lose my mind. And your older brother's like the sort of heir, and you're just nothing. So
yeah, you're the spare, right?
Yeah.
You should at least get to ride a dragon.
Yeah.
But anyway, him going and doing that and facing that was a very formative event. That's one of those tapestry events that we keep talking about.
Yes.
That was Aemon's Rhaenyra on the bridge with Daemon,
totally.
Right? And so not only was that a triumph for him, it was also a triumph for the Greens and Alicent and all of that, blah, blah, blah. They have the strongest dragon now. But the scene itself was it was magical. It was like can you put yourself in that position, in his shoes? You literally prevented the dragon from roasting you, from being incinerated, using the words that you learned. Because he learned that by watching and independently studying, the words to use. Because he obviously hasn't done it himself before,
right?
So it was so lucky that he just knew what to say in that moment.
He listened to Harry speak parcel tongue in his
Yeah,
sleep.
exactly. And then going and doing it, the joy and like the triumph of hanging on as well, not falling off, because he was like 3 pounds of grip strength away from death.
I thought he was gonna fall off and die. Like, I thought that was gonna be it. I was prepared for that.
But that scene was so exciting,
It
and
was.
he finally rights the ship, and it was kind of beautiful, and then he gets off. He gets off, and he's just a little fucker.
He's a little
you
shit.
know, like it's he didn't have to do that.
I know.
right?
No.
I know what you're saying. Like, when we were watching, I was kind of joking and like, but I mean this in like a nice way. It reminded me of when Harry's riding Buckbeak.
Yeah.
In Prisoner of Azkaban, just like this, like nice. I mean, that's a much lower stakes moment, right?
It's wish fulfillment. It's
yeah.
true fantasy.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like that little kid part of you that's like tickled when you read good fantasy or when you watch good fantasy.
Absolutely.
Like, that's how that felt. You're totally right. I did really like that moment, even though Aemond is a little shit, and I hate
it's
him.
such a
But-
beautiful payoff from last week. It's like a direct echo to the dark dragon pit we saw him in last week.
Yeah.
Where like slowly we see the pig come out. Here slowly we get to see the dragon's true size and ferocity.
Mm-hmm.
And like the brightest thing in that scene is the dragon's eye and the moon. There are so many
Yeah.
scenes in this episode that are cut like montages.
Yeah.
Whether it's Rhaenyra and Daemon planning the Laenor thing,
Mm-hmm.
or the whole altercation with the kids that is all these jump shots of combat between them punching each other.
Mm-hmm.
This, I think the YA thing is partially because we see every swoosh and movement and flap of the wings, and
Yeah.
we really get to suspend almost the whole narrative
You have to
and
chew
just
on it.
we get to pretend that we're riding a
I
dragon for a few
know.
minutes.
I'm realizing now that I think what's unique about the Game of Thrones world, like both the books and this story, is that we're not just following the adults or just following the kids. We're getting to do both. Because like when you read like YA, for example, fantasy, and you're following the one kid, you see everything from their perspective. You get the riding the dragon moment, you get the, getting to become king or getting to learn the thing or whatever, and you kind of know what's going on with mom and dad, but like you don't really. And so like, but we get to see this conflict among the kids about Rhaenyra's kids being bastards, about like, well, he punched me, oh, he kicked me, oh, he threw a rock at me, he cut my eye out. Like, you get to see it from their perspective, but then we also get to see the ramifications and everything else going on with the adults. And I think that's a pretty cool thing to have, because we get that in Game of Thrones too, right? We get Arya and Sansa seeing what happens with Joffrey and the butcher's boy and Lady, but we also see Ned and Tyrion and Jaime. Like, we get to see all of that, so I think that's pretty cool.
And I just listened to that chapter again,
Yeah.
and you see Robert's total exhaustion and exasperation with having to deal with it and hear everyone's stories.
Yeah.
And Viserys so reminded me
Yeah.
of that he had that same exasperation, and I was so crestfallen that Viserys is now reminding me of Robert Baratheon instead of Macbeth. It totally serves that Duncan point, because any sort of parallel to Robert.
I know. Well, we drew
You've
parallels
checked out.
in the hunting scene. We really
Totally.
drew parallels
Totally.
there. So
So
I love that YA thought, Tristan.
But I do
Yeah.
just want to say, so I mean I feel robbed though, because I was with him in that moment, and then whenever he got back out and said, "Yeah, it was your mom's dragon," what?
She's dead now.
Yeah, she isn't gonna ride it. Like, I feel upset because that was maybe between he and the daughter Helaena, I guess, were the two sort of Team Alicent characters that I was like, okay, maybe we can get a level-headed, POV style character on that side, and then he does this and is immediately a villain,
I know.
like irredeemably a villain, a little shit.
Because he's a little Targaryen.
I wanted to feel bad that he lost an eye, but like, He was trying to, he literally punched every single one of those kids, was about to bash Jace's brains out. The only
Nearly
reason
strangled the other one.
Yeah, the only reason that they lived is because these Rhaenyra's children work together well as a team.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
That was cool. With the sand
to
and the...
see, yeah, exactly. But I didn't want to hate Aemond, but now I find him very irritating. And his brother, we already know how he is, jerking off onto the city,
Right.
And getting drunk at a funeral.
Yeah.
Cool guy.
It's just I want there to be a redeeming quality in Alicent's side, and I am just
It's not there.
not seeing one.
No, because she's a bad person and is
So-
raising bad children.
I wonder if we just kind of poison that whole generation. Since we're on Rhaenyra's side, I wonder, as things escalate, if we make Rhaenyra less and less redeemable, and then we have to look for someone to aspire to. Tristan, I know you like having someone who's a knight, like you want a Kristen Cole to be. Or
Yeah.
someone like Jon Snow. And I think Rhaenyra's younger kid, who has that conversation with Corlys, saying he doesn't want it, that obligation of ruling Driftmark,
Yeah.
and being a bastard and defending his brother and acting from the point of honor. I think maybe season 2, after we age him up for the last time, I think he could become that character you root for.
I was going to say, the only characters who seem to be like, I mean, it's hard because they're kids, but who seem to be good people are Rhaenyra's kids.
Right.
Because they're not full Targaryens.
But if we don't
You know?
off them like Ned Starks, then they could really, I think they could add some dynamism to the show in season 2.
Sure.
Instead
yeah.
of it being just a plethora of villains.
Yeah, and even if it's not about them trying to take the throne, like even if it is finally accepted that they are in fact bastards and can't inherit, they could still try to, do something else or achieve some other goal for the greater good.
And the noble characters don't want to be king anyway.
Well, exactly, yeah.
That's John's whole
Honestly,
thing.
maybe the issue is that we only like the young characters because they haven't lived long enough to do really awful
They're
things.
uncorrupted, yeah.
Because we loved young Rhaenyra. Young Alicent was honestly more sympathetic than older Alicent has turned out to be.
Yeah.
You
know what? Damon's kids are cool. They're sweet.
Yeah,
Little
exactly.
girls. I like
For now.
them. I know, for now.
So at what point are these younger characters going to have their dragon stealing moment, right? When are they going to be sullied in our eyes to where I'm just like, oh God, another one?
I think probably when they're forced to marry their half siblings. Or whatever the hell they
or
are.
when
They're
someone-
weird half cousin
Yeah,
things.
yeah. When someone thinks to ask, what's the line of succession now?
Yeah.
Am I second or am I fourth?
Yeah. Or am I eighth?
Right.
Yeah.
So who, other than Rhaenyra, who, we've all just collectively as an audience decided to ignore her transgressions.
Sure.
Yes.
She
But-
could do no wrong.
Yeah, exactly. The Daenerys everyone always wanted.
Yep.
So who other than her is sort of, and I've only got one in mind, but who can be rooted for? I think
Daemon.
so I think the answer in my mind is Corlys. That's that's the only other
correct
person
answer.
that I've got in my mind.
I mean, yeah, that's the correct answer. He has all the right to do whatever he does, and I think he's justified, and I think he's got good goals.
But he's old enough to have gone through a number of horrible things.
Yeah.
I mean, even to the point of Rhaenys saying, like, you're more mad about me being snubbed than I am.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to his character. I like people who hold grudges on behalf of their
but
loved
I
ones.
I don't
But
think
he
it's-
hasn't become an embittered, evil, vengeful piece of shit. He's looking out for his kids. He's looking out for his grandkids.
Yeah.
Even if they're
was.
illegitimate.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if I think Rhaenys has got it right. I don't think it's necessarily about I don't care that they're not really my grandchildren. I love them. It's more they have my name and I want that to continue on.
No, that was Corlys's position.
That's who we're talking about.
Oh, I thought you said Rhaenys just then.
No, I know.
It was just all
she's
woven
about
together.
him.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
she's right about him.
Sure.
Like him being mad about her not getting the throne is not I think it's less about him being upset for her and more about I don't get to be the king consort. Like a Velaryon
Yeah.
doesn't get to sit on the throne. I think that's more what it is.
Yeah, I just mean he's in his 50s and hasn't become Daemon,
Yeah.
even though he's seen a bunch of horrible
Yeah,
stuff.
no, he's a better person.
He's
for
more
sure.
aspirational.
And I feel bad for him because now he thinks both of his kids are dead. So that sucks. But
Ooh, his brother scares me.
which one is that?
Corlys's brother, the one who basically delivered the eulogy at the funeral for Laena.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's a hothead. He hates Daemon. We saw that at the Stepstones.
Yes, that's right.
And now with no male heir on the Velaryon side, I'm a little worried about what he ultimately ends up doing, because he has openly displayed his contempt for the fact that Rhaenyra has sired, or has had 3 non-Velaryon children. So maybe
Yeah.
the schism doesn't come from Rhaenys and Corlys. Maybe it comes from Corlys's brother for the Velaryon side.
Interesting. Well, yeah, because isn't the heir Rhaenyra's youngest kid?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that
oldest
was-
kid.
No, the oldest kid's the heir to the throne. Iron Throne. Right?
Yeah,
Isn't
the
that how
heir
that
is the
works?
younger brother.
Okay, yeah.
The heir to
Driftmark.
To Driftmark,
Yes,
right.
yes.
Yeah. So,
Also, the
interesting.
fact that this place gets an episode titled, and we get all this intrigue about the Velaryons,
Yeah, they're important.
it will continue to
They're
be
not
a-
just being conveniently killed off and that's the end of it.
Right.
But we
right.
do also know that there are no Velaryons in Game of Thrones.
That is true. So what happens to them?
Finally, I'll get the Game of Thrones ending I wanted. Everyone
everybody
being
dies.
killed and obliterated.
It's just Rogue One.
A slow panning shot over a graveyard.
That's what we
That's
all
what
wanted.
I wanted.
I know.
So I think maybe a nice note to end on is the biggest hullabaloo that has resulted from this episode.
Oh, I didn't even want to talk about it.
I think there's an interesting place we can get to.
Okay.
So the internet has been very mad that all the beach scenes were in very low light,
Yeah.
despite all
were.
being filmed in broad daylight and
Oh.
then being edited. It's like day to night
Twilight.
photography. Yeah, so that's how they were edited, and the lighting and the color was changed. And people have been
I don't
saying,
know what that
That
was.
was
I hated
Twilight.
it.
Twilight. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. Audience, did you recognize
That
those
was Twilight.
beautifully sung notes?
There's
that
the
was,
poll.
That was Twilight.
Yeah,
I was
so
really hoping one of
people
y'all would
people
get
have been tweeting all day and on other networks and things saying like I couldn't see anything, and HBO is actually replying to some of them. Like the HBO Max account is saying the dimmed lighting
Mr.
of
HBO? I'm sorry. He's so mad at me.
Howard Box Office.
the dimmed lighting of this scene was an intentional creative decision.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I assumed. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
So my question: what happened to you after an hour?
I don't know. I
So my
started losing
question
it.
for
Honestly, why was that like a second-hand heckling? She heckled you over the thing you were reading.
I'm sorry.
So my question for you two educated and smart, considerate adults is what do you think the goal or purpose was of that intentional creative decision?
Number one, it's to make the dragon look cooler because,
If you can't see him?
yes. Because
Okay.
I have noticed in this show, as beautifully done as this show is, as high as the production value is, some of the dragon scenes, especially the ones where they're flying, don't look very good. And this one looked great because it was so dark. So I think that's one thing. Also, it's what's the kid's name? It's Aemond. He's, sneaking out when it's still dark out, and Rhaenyra is sneaking around when she's sleeping with Daemon. Like, it's a lot of these people doing
Yeah.
behind the scenes sneaky things in the dark, trying to get things done quietly and under the radar. So I think that's part of it.
It's a stealth episode.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was still too dark. I mean, we had all of our lights off, and we had
Yeah, we have to watch these in pitch black now.
and I still couldn't see it. And we have
I could.
we don't have a crappy TV, but we
have a good
it's a
TV.
nice TV, and I couldn't see anything.
I could. And I
don't-
was right next to you with my glasses
Well,
on.
congratulations. I guess
think
you
we
have
could
better
see
vision
everything.
than me.
I mean, it was a little oppressive. Tristan, I'll let you answer before I babble.
Well, if we're going along with the theme of the episode, if fire is a prison and fire emits light, then the only time that these characters are actually free to do the things that they want to do and follow their wills and the whim of what they feel driven to do is under cover of night. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if we're really going to buy HBO's explanation that it was an intentional choice and not just some oversight, then I think that we have to do it in line with the themes of the episode. The only reason that Aemond gets to go to get this dragon, the sole object of his heart's desire, is because it's so dark and nobody sees him. The only reason that Rhaenyra and Daemon get to sort of consummate their pre-wedding is because it's so dark and no one can see them. I was worried that we were gonna get a Bran style scene.
Yes.
I totally was expecting that too.
Yeah, where he was going to see that. So I think they knew that we would go there with it, especially because they transitioned to that scene one right after another. But the thread that ties that scene, other than it being nighttime and on a beach, is not that it was in the same area. It's that they were doing the same thing. Both of these characters, or all three of these characters really, were going and achieving the one thing that they really, really, really wanted. And the only way that they could do that was outside of, the light, in the darkness.
Versus Alicent, who tried to do what she really wants, which is to kill Rhaenyra, but she tried to do it in front of everybody, right in front of the fire, where
and that's a
everyone could see
well-lit
her,
scene.
and it was not successful.
And whenever Aemond gets back into that cave, again, you've got a torch there, it's well lit. He has to come back into the real world out of this fantasy, and he is sort of tethered by the bounds of, that is my mom's dragon. You don't get to have that. He has to face the repercussions in the real world for his actions that he took whenever he could really pursue his true desires in the dark.
And that becomes our fire and blood scene.
Yes.
Bloodshed by the light of the fire.
Totally.
I think it is, I believe HBO that it is an intentional creative decision, because the same director who did this one, Miguel Sapochnik, is the guy who did The Long Night, which was the previous episode people got mad at for being dark. So yes, he definitely saw that blowback and made the decision again. So I respect that.
Yeah.
Even if it's annoying for some people, I totally believe it's an artistic choice. I think, to follow your thread, Tristan, I think it does speak to the themes of the episode. Mostly the oppressive grief. The first 20 minutes of this episode is a very slow-moving funeral, and it's a grief that we see some characters have, like some Laena's daughters, for example. That's a real grief. And then we see the false grief in like Rhaenyra and Aegon, who are drinking or like rolling their eyes and don't care.
Yeah.
But while those people politic and scheme, the people who knew Laena and cared about her are fully incapacitated. Laenor is just out of the picture for half the episode.
Yeah, nearly drowning himself in the ocean, which I thought he was going to do.
That grief is oppressive. It's blanketing, distracting. It obscures everything for them. And in that way, it expands on the theme that I brought up last week of isolation. Like, we really haven't seen that many funerals in Westeros in any of these shows. And this scene being so protracted, so honorific and dark, and maybe it's because I've been rereading the first Game of Thrones book, it reminded me of Ned and Robert in the crypt.
Oh, sure.
Which is also an incredibly dark scene.
Yeah.
It's poorly lit. They're kind of admiring this gray, dusty kind of rock face that I'm sure looks nothing like Lyanna, who they're talking about. So it's all obscured anyway. It builds into that seen and unseen thing we've talked about.
Yeah.
And to build that back to the content of the episode, a character is blinded. So seen and unseen is everywhere in this episode.
Interesting. And he was able to do what he wanted in the dark. And he said even like his now partial blindness was a fair price to pay for getting that dragon. So
yeah, which I thought was maybe a little like hyper mature for like a 12-year-old or younger.
I kind of admired it. I was like, good for you. He's
but
doing
I
his
don't
best.
know. how did he like immediately develop that maturity? 5 minutes ago he was impetuous.
Yeah, it's him pretending to be, it's him playing at being a grown-up. That's why he tries to ride this dragon in the first place, even though he's a child and this is like the biggest, most powerful dragon.
Also, if he's been doing the math and he knows Aegon is worthless, like I assume if you're a kid of one of these warring women, you are undyingly loyal to your mom.
Oh yeah,
regardless
that's
of whatever
why neither of them snitch on her
Right.
about who told you this rumor.
Exactly. Regardless of what they do wrong, regardless of them trying to one-up your dad and stab a baby in front of you, you're going to be
Yeah.
on your mom's side. So if he's looking at it that way of my older brother is useless, maybe it's down to me. If I just got the biggest dragon in the world and felt like I could finally defend my mom and not have to worry about my stupid-ass brother,
Yeah, and my actual father
Maybe-
is falling apart. Yeah.
maybe I would be cocky enough to drop a line like that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again,
it
he's
would
a
give
Targaryen.
it would give you some perspective.
Yeah, and we've seen Alicent is not afraid to be like harsh and like really intense with her sons, at least with Aegon. I don't know.
You
if
know
she's
what?
Like with Aemond.
Yeah.
We also need to entertain the fact that he could just be a dick, as is borne out by the fact that he is now a one-eyed dragon.
I mean, yeah, he's a piece of shit, but we understand why. It's not just he sucks. Like
Right.
it all makes sense.
No,
So-
that was just a dick joke. It was obligatory.
can you
I
ma-
won't apologize.
Can you say it again? I didn't quite.
One-eyed dragon?
I was joking, Cam. That was called humor.
Do it
It
again.
was just so well delivered. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you so much. You're so nice to me.
Clip it.
Okay.
Does anyone else have anything else?
I don't think so.
Go.
I mean,
Right?
so there's really not. I think we unpacked most of everything. I was a little upset by how shallow the water was where Laena buried. That was like 10 feet.
I know. It's like, oh, she's just below the surface.
That was like they should have a do not dive sign right
I
there.
know. They should at least have like taken her out a bit further, like
Sure.
into the deeper waters. And it was like, oh, look, it's all the other coffins.
That's like throwing ashes into the oncoming wind.
back from whence you came. Yeah, it's not great. But
I'm
yeah.
sort of relieved that next week is the last time jump.
Me too. I'm tired of all these darn time jumps and recastings, and I don't know.
mean, they're always doing a good job with the recastings,
no,
but
they
I like
are.
to settle in.
I know. I don't feel settled. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I assume Rhaenyra and Daemon are going to have at least one kid in 6 years.
You think so? Because that kid would be
Yes.
so far down the line of succession.
Doesn't matter. They got to join.
Also, is Rhaenyra going to want to be out of the game for 9 months right now
Also-
when Alicent's pulling knives on her?
I don't know how far down in the line of succession that child would be. He would pretty much be first.
But that would agitate a war with all of the other nice kids.
Because here's the thing. It can't be Daemon's kids because they're not Rhaenyra's. Like, it
Right.
can't be his. They're never going to be in line unless literally everyone else
Okay,
dies.
that's true.
And it can't be Alicent's kids because Rhaenyra is the firstborn. And that's how it goes. And so if it does people just decide to accept that Rhaenyra's kids are bastards, she does not have an heir.
Okay, but here's the problem. We would then need 20 more years of time jumps for that kid to be a player in the game. And I don't want to do that.
Well, maybe
I don't want
that's
Helen Mirren as Rhaenyra.
well, maybe that's gonna. Okay, well, here's my question: how on earth is Viserys going to survive another 6 years?
He will survive 3 seasons.
This man cannot die. It's insane to me.
I honestly am surprised that he's been around this long.
I
as
truly, I was expecting him to die in episode 3.
All
I don't know how this
Meg,
has
you
happened.
want the dragon scenes to look better?
Yeah.
All I want at this point is for Viserys to make it the whole season.
I want him to be like Henry VIII in the Tudors, where he just keeps adding canes to look older and older.
Yeah, for context, that's a historical drama that wasn't good, but we watched the whole thing.
What are you talking
And
about? It's amazing.
So they were going through the 8 wives that he had. And the show got canceled, so they only had 1 season to wrap it up. So they had to speed through the last 3 wives in 1 season when they spent 2 seasons on the first wife.
Yeah.
So they were rapidly just like grease painting this guy's hair to make it look gray and
Yeah.
old. And the way they aged him up finally for the last wife was giving him a second cane to walk with.
And it's funny
Wait,
because this
like
actor,
he was double fisting
Yes.
canes.
well, because this
It was
man,
a cane akimbo.
Yes, he looked like
also-
General Grievous.
He also, the actor refused to gain any weight. And, Henry VIII was like this big guy,
fat redhead,
right?
yeah.
He was not only was he large, he was really tall.
Yeah.
This guy has he's got Kendall, Succession.
Kendall Roy.
He's got Kendall Roy shoulders and is like 5'8" and is like skinny as a rail.
It's a chaotic
It's
performance.
so
He's
funny.
very fun to watch, but he's not exactly
But you know
the
what's
character.
fun is Natalie Dormer, who played Marjorie in Game of Thrones, is Anne Boleyn. So that's
Yeah, she
fun.
was great.
She's great.
And
But-
Henry Cavill was his number 2.
That's right.
before The Witcher.
Geralt. That's right. Good for him. Yeah.
Ah,
Okay.
Cool. Well, I'm excited for next week.
Full circle,
Cool.
everybody.
That'll be episode 8. And we will be back on Friday with our first ever just straight discussion episode about an idea, not tied to any one work of art. And then we'll be back on Tuesday with episode 8 of House of the Dragon. And then we'll start the next Witcher book. We're going to alternate Fridays for a little while.
Yeah, we're not stopping The Witcher. We're just taking a bit.
Just going to manage
some time.
Well, we're going to alternate just so we can manage the longer chapters and give you a good level of analysis. But for plugs, we're Second Breakfast Pod everywhere on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Gmail, if you want to just email us your thoughts and theories. And I put a lot of work into TikTok a couple weeks ago, and then this last week I shifted my focus like the Eye of Sauron to our YouTube channel. So every day I put up a clip, which was a chunk of our previous House of the Dragon episode.
They look really good. You did a good job.
Basically, I chopped it into 7 to 10 minute chunks. I gave them all their own little album art, which takes a lot of time.
I'm sure it does.
So those are all up on YouTube. I'll continue to push all of that, and you can find us everywhere, especially on Substack, Second Breakfast Pod. You subscribe for free, and you'll get some bonus stuff about each episode. And for our paid subscribers, you get a collection of dumb memes. You get exclusive...
I was going to say, that's been our latest perk for our paid subscribers is we collect all the best Hot D memes and put them in the Substack.
The latest episode straight to your inbox. You'll get some extra little preamble and some bonus coverage of works of art, some bonus little episodes. So that's where we are. I want to thank Maggie and Tristan for joining the pod again this week.
You don't need to thank me. This is my podcast.
He does. Speak for yourself, Maggie. Graciously, you are welcome.
All right. I want to thank Tristan for joining, and I want to shame Maggie once again for dragging us down.
This is always so much fun.
Fine. I am not. You are not welcome.
Was that to me or Tristan?
Both of y'all. I am not.
Everyone can get it.
Join us next week for a Maggie-only House of the Dragon episode.
Oh my God, please no.
Honestly, let's cold open. Just leave her there alone.
Make me talk. I will just...
No life preserver.
I will just eat 14 Reese's Take Fives. That's what I'll do.
Crunching into the mic.
I'm eating peanuts. Okay.
All
okay.
right. Well,
have a good week, everyone.
See you soon.
Bye.
See ya.